Response video to a few Professor Anton videos. Watched 4 or 5 of them today, and not as bad as usual. I mean, I actually understood some of what he was saying, and that was good. So, progress, I guess. So anyway, I'll kind of try to go through these subjects. So I can't remember what they were titled, but they're sort of in order, so you should be able to find them or figure it out. So he's talking about human consciousness and this what distinguishes our consciousness from animal consciousness, and even how our consciousness has evolved as we have become cultured, let's say, modernized, whatever the right term might be. So versus being 100,000 years ago or 300,000 years ago, the consciousness we had then. And so he puts a lot of store in this language thing. First a verbal language, and then a written one, and connects it, I guess, to emotions. And so that would make our conscious experience richer because it would be a more emotional experience. But I would argue that the end result, though, of language is the acquisition of intelligence, of knowledge, understanding. And some of that is not going to be emotionally rewarding, gratifying, enjoyable, fun. Some of it's going to be, it's going to give you answers that aren't going to be mystical and wonderful and charming and all that other stuff that culture, ignorant culture, can give you. So in the end result of even language is for it to become more and more efficient. I mean, the idea is, he's doing exactly the opposite, in my opinion, because he's creating all these new words and using them as if they're generic words, as if they're words people knew when they were 10 years old. And they're not. They're not common language words, and they probably shouldn't be used this gratuitously. But I think civilization is moving towards a more common language, and a language that might even include fewer words rather than more words. So definitions could get more precise and more explicit, and maybe a language that excludes bad definitions, words that don't have meaning, like spontaneous. I've pointed out we have a lot of words in our vocabulary that don't really have an accurate definition anymore. The word doesn't mean anything because what it's defining doesn't have any reality that we can discern. That's been demonstrated to exist with anything called evidence. But anyway, so I guess that's my interpretation. Is he's focusing on what language does for us emotionally as a feeling, and saying that it somehow makes our life richer. And my argument would be that in the end, language gave us power. It gave us intelligence. And a lot of that intelligence or knowledge is, to me, is not pointing to some good story. It's pointing to a bad story. It's not going to be something that's going to make us, in the end, it's going to serve that emotional, to take us to any kind of emotional high. And it's going to make us capable of seeing just how dirty life always was, just how dismal it was, stupid and futile it was, and all of that stuff. And so anyway, so I guess it's just the difference between being a little airy-fairy about what language is doing and not being. To me, it's a practical thing. Language is a practical thing, and intelligence must have one to communicate, to gain knowledge. So whatever. But I don't think it makes our conscious experience necessarily any richer or more meaningful or more I don't think when the dumb animal was boning his wife 100,000 years ago that he wasn't having as good a time. He probably was. But anyway, moving on. So the next video was about the cyborg kind of stuff. So now we're heading towards the virtual reality a little bit, just whether you can duplicate or mimic a human being, and how much substance we would actually need. And he sort of makes the argument, I guess, in a snarky way, like, well, would you want your daughter to date one? And yeah, I would. So yeah, I don't care. I think we can fake it. he fears fake humans. He fears faking life, and I say, no, go ahead and fake it, but you can't do it worse than reality. Reality, the real world is conniving, weaseling, polio, botulism, it's knowing you're going to die, it's aging, it's a lot of things that I can certainly live without. And if we exchange for that, well, I don't even think we have to give up. We don't have to give up anything of this emotional experience, because our deception can be complete. We don't have to self-deceive ourselves. We don't have to say the fake is the real and convince ourselves of it, like a Pringles potato chip versus a real potato chip. If nobody told you which one was fake, then maybe it would be a different contest. Maybe it would be a different experience. Because they have their own advantages and disadvantages. And so maybe the fake world will never be the real world, but it'll have its own advantages. And I think the advantage is going to be significant. I mean, incredibly significant if we do it all the way, if we fully immerse into the fake digital world. If we put our consciousness completely into an endless, infinite world where we can be anything, we can do anything. I mean, anything, literally anything. If you can imagine it, you can be it. I mean, there's huge potential in that. And to dismiss it like it's just some sort of, it's just going to be like some cheap Data robot on the Star Trek. Well, look, even Data was an interesting character. He was in the show. He was part of the cast. People didn't hate the fact that he was in the show. You know what I mean? It wasn't like an obnoxious. People didn't think about it. Oh yeah, well, it doesn't speak perfect English, and it still was a personality. It still was a thing. So I mean, we're not that hard to mimic. We're not that hard to duplicate in substance. And yeah, I would argue that even on an emotional level, all I need from another human being is, positive feedback. Really, I mean, what do you need realistically? I mean, how much conversation do you need in the bedroom? So I think that you can fool me pretty easily. I'll be easy to fool. So anyway, and reality sucks. I mean, this delusion that somehow reality's working just fine and we should go back to nature. There's a guy who said that on one of my videos, or he PM'd me with this crap or whatever it was. But this whole idea that we should go back to being hunters and gatherers, picking ticks off our ass. I don't get any of that. Go raspberry picking for a couple of hours and see how much fun it is, and then do it every fucking day. Ugh. God, that's how you want to live? Fuck you. Yeah, I don't want 10 seconds of nature's utopia. Sorry, no sale at all. Ugh. I want a duplicate that takes all the crap out of it, pulls all the weeds out. It's just the pretty flowers and the nice and the pretty and the good smells. And yeah, give me the perfumed fake version for sure. Alright, so anyway, next video. So he did a response video, sort of to me, I guess, on the objective morality subject. I think that was the one to me. Yeah, he sort of agrees that the kernel of value, is this suffering thing. It's quite obvious. You see it suffering, you say, well, let's get rid of that. That's no good. Better nothing than that. I mean, squirming in terror and horror and pain and misery and suffering. Yeah, no. Better a plastic donut than that. Anything better than that. So that kernel of morality is easy to recognize or accept. And so I'm glad he conceded that. So that makes the whole conversation so much easier. And then he's basically just arguing that, no, but the morality we have to live with practically is much more complicated. We don't even know the morality. Now, this would be my end example, would be, let's say we had the capacity to give rats intelligence. So now rats could become as smart as us. What would be the morality of doing it? Would it be in the rat's best interest to be intelligent? Would it be in our interest for rats to be intelligent? Do we think they would do something other than, like, say, I'm a white rat and I'm a black rat, and they'd have a fight in a nuclear war and they'd blow us all up, right? I mean, the end game, we know, we can sort of see the problem of the desire thing. and the rats aren't going to be able to handle it any better than we are. And so, yeah, the moral question would be, should we give them the power to perpetrate a Holocaust? Because that's what they're going to do with intelligence. They're going to build tanks and run each other over with them. We can see it. We know if we gave the technology to any animal, that's what it was going to do. It's going to operate in its self-interest and based on its stupid prejudices and bigotries. You know, I mean, you give lions bazookas, and there aren't going to be any more hyenas on planet Earth. You know, I mean, they're just not. There it just isn't. That's just the way all animals are going to be in that position of wanting to protect themselves from the vulnerabilities that exist. So anyway, but getting back to the real substance of the issue, I mean, I just throwing the rats thing out there because that's an interesting question. I mean, do you give another organism intelligence if we gain